Episodes of Palette Swap are suggested by viewers like you. If there's a character you'd like me to analyze, let me know in the comment section down below. That's Jaguar-masked for good morrow everyone, Silvershire here, and welcome back to Palette Swap, where I rank the costumes and character designs of your favorite fighting games. And by your favorite fighting games, I mean my favorite fighting games, and by my favorite fighting games, I mean Tekken. Today, we're looking at the luchador who takes his gimmick way too seriously, King. But before we begin our analysis, here's a quick refresher course on who King is and what we should be looking for in his character designs. The man who had come to be known as King grew up on the streets, where he earned his reputation as a fierce brawler. One day, he picked a fight he couldn't win, and he was left for dead outside a Catholic monastery. The priests took him in and nursed him back to health, after which he turned his life around. He joined the clergy, denounced his violent past, and eventually built an orphanage to provide the help that he had so desperately needed when he was younger. But as it turns out, you kinda need money to run an orphanage, and he didn't have a whole lot of that. So donning a mask to conceal his identity and a tail because he liked it, I guess, he began a lucrative career as the professional wrestler, King. Combat was his life once more, but now he was fighting for something larger than himself. And then he got killed by an Aztec god from outer space. But this was not the end, for a young man who had grown up in King's orphanage was determined to carry on his legacy. He trained under Armor King, a friendly rival of the original King, to become King the Second. From the neck down, King's Tekken 1 1P is nothing special. It's typical wrestling attire with an inoffensive blue, black, and gray color palette. But of course, the star of the show is his jaguar mask. It, as well as King's overall appearance, is an homage to the Japanese wrestler Tiger Mask. While the inspiration is clear, the realistic style of King's mask does a good job of setting him apart, and it's a super unique and memorable bit of character design. Granted, it's kind of goofy looking in the first two games, but I won't hold graphical limitations against it. 6 out of 10. His 2P is what happens when he uses a fire flower. I can appreciate what they were going for here, but I really don't like it. The shirt and suspenders are alright I guess, although the white of his tie totally blends in, and the pants are a terrible color. I would have preferred them to either go for a deeper red or just commit to pink. A more fundamental issue is that this outfit does nothing to complement the jaguar mask in its design or in its palette. 3 out of 10. Strangely, his 2P is a different color in console versions of the game. I have no idea why this is the case. It didn't happen to any other costumes for any other characters. But I'm glad, because it's a definite improvement. Blue contrasts his tie better, as well as just being more pleasant to look at than light red, and I like that his suspenders match his pants. 4 out of 10. Both of his Tekken 2 costumes are slight alterations to those of the previous game. His 1P now has yellow markings on his tights and black studded gloves not dissimilar to Kazuya's. These aren't huge changes, but they do make the design a bit more interesting. 7 out of 10. His 2P now has rolled up sleeves and the same gloves as his 1P, which makes it seem more like a costume he might wear in the ring. This is definitely better, but I still don't love it. 5 out of 10. Tekken 3 marks the first appearance of King the Second. His 1P is similar to those of his predecessor, but now with a much brighter color palette. Not everyone could pull off this level of saturation, but wrestlers and especially luchadors are known for flashy costumes, so it's a good fit. The addition of purple works really well, as it's yellow's complementary color and one of blue's analogous colors. He doesn't look quite as rough and tumble as his predecessor, but he makes up for that with energy and personality. 7 out of 10. His 2P is a fan favorite. He's got drip, and sauce, and other moist-sounding terms that are inexplicably slang for good fashion. He's wearing Armor King's mask, which is a nice inclusion since he's no longer a playable character. King and Armor King's casual outfits always need to wrestle, pun intended, with the inherent goofiness of wearing a cat mask alongside regular clothing, but the jaguar print on his pants ties it all together and helps it make sense. The kanji on his back translate to Mishima Industries as evil, which is a bold move for someone participating in a tournament run by Mishima Industries. It's cool that his costume informs us about his worldview, even if its method of doing so is about as subtle as a shining wizard. It's weird it's in Japanese instead of Spanish, though. Maybe he picked it up at a gift shop. 8 out of 10. King retains his Tekken 3 costumes in Tekken Tag Tournament. Since I don't take graphical improvements into account, the same scores apply. However, he also gets an alternate color for each. The recolor of his 1P is turquoise and yellow, which looks good and feels appropriate for King. Unlike the classic version, his boots and gloves are now multicolored, which adds some nice visual contrast. It also removes his tights, and while I think that weakens the design, I appreciate ults that are more than just palette swaps. It makes them distinct and memorable. 7 out of 10. The recolor of his 2P is not nearly as complex, nor is it nearly as good. I like the dark red of his pants, but that bright orange shirt drowns out everything else. Personally, I would have left the pants gray and used this red for his shirt. That would have looked real slick. As is, this is a 6 out of 10. His Tekken 4 1P is based on his Tag Tournament recolor, which is pretty unusual as most of those palettes got immediately abandoned. Both of his costumes now have long flowing hair, which is super cool. It's one of the few clues we get about the man under the mask. Plus, it does a good job of indicating that this is indeed just a mask, which is something that a lot of new players don't realize. He also has his name on his underwear, which is the sort of branding I would expect from a pro wrestler. All in all, there's a lot to like about this design, but it's really let down by its colors. Since he has no tights, his knee pads are the same color as the rest of his boots, there's very little variety. And when we do get some variety, it comes in the form of this super bright magenta that clashes with the turquoise. Dude looks like a Vaporwave album. And as a part of any other costume, the jaguar print on his trunks could look cool, but here it's just gaudy. 5 out of 10. His 2P bears some similarities to those of the first two games, but now with a western flair. Surprisingly few of King's costumes take inspiration from his Mexican heritage, so it's cool to see a bit of that incorporated into his design, but I think they could have gone further. Some of his official artwork adds a poncho and sombrero to this outfit, and as goofy as a jaguar wearing a hat seems on paper, this is unironically cool. By casting his face in shadow and concealing much of his body, it gives him a very ominous presence, which would have been perfect considering King's story in this game. Armored King was murdered by Marduk between Tekkens 3 and 4, so now King is out for revenge. The version we got isn't bad though. 7 out of 10. His Tekken 5 1P is an iteration of his Tekken 3 1P. His blue gloves and single elbow pad have been replaced with yellow gauntlets, the crotch logo is back, the yellow markings on his tights have evolved into a larger swirl design, and he now has some blue accents on his gloves and boots. This is a perfect evolution of his classic design. It maintains the most important elements while adding a lot more detail. It shows restraint and avoids making the costume too busy. When I think of King, I think of this. 10 out of 10. His 2P is a long coat paired with fingerless gloves, slacks, and dress shoes. Calls to mind both a priest's cassock and the coats worn by some professional wrestlers, so it does a great job of reflecting his character. It's equal parts tough and stylish. Black, white, and gold is a really sharp color palette and one that matches his jaguar mask perfectly. This is definitely my favorite of his 2Ps. 9 out of 10. All of Dark Resurrection's costumes are palette swaps of the Tekken 5 costumes. King's 1P is now black, and I love how the bottom half looks, but I'm baffled that they didn't change his gauntlets to match. Makes the design feel imbalanced and less distinct from the original version. You could argue that drawing attention to his arms is a way of communicating his grappler playstyle, but none of his other costumes do that, so I don't think it was intended here. Besides, he has some of the most devastating kicks in the game. I feel weird about docking so many points for a simple palette swap, especially since the colors aren't even bad, but compared to everything else, I can't go above a 6 out of 10. His 2P is blue and white, which is a fun callback to his older 2Ps. I prefer the original version, but there's nothing wrong with this one. 8 out of 10. Tekken 6, Street Fighter X Tekken, and Tekken Tag Tournament 2 all reuse one or both of his Tekken 5 designs. After the Kazuya episode, I'm really sick of saying the same score applies, so I'll be skipping any of the repeats from here on out. His Tekken 6 3P is what his Dark Resurrection 1P should have been. It looks so much better with black gauntlets. He's wearing a t-shirt now, which is a collaboration with the real-world clothing brand Tap Out. Again, I like that this is more than just a palette swap, and since Tap Out is a wrestling term, it makes sense even out of context. An all-black outfit would run the risk of looking flat, but that's avoided here thanks to some gold and silver details on his legs, as well as the orange Tap Out logo. 9 out of 10. His Street Fighter X Tekken 2P is a demonic look that would seem right at home in Devil May Cry. There's a lot of triangular shape language that communicates his danger and aggression. His mask is now made of dark, jagged metal, and his tail has been replaced with that of a devil. This over-the-top edginess tends to be divisive, but I love this sort of design, especially since it's so different from anything he's worn in the past. Despite his heroic background, King is a frightening character, so it makes sense to lean into that. Plus, it's red, which is my favorite color. My only issue is that the bottom half looks so normal. Why is he just wearing wrestling trunks and tights and boots? I would expect something monstrous to match the top. 8 out of 10. Street Fighter X Tekken also gives everyone swap costumes inspired by characters from the other series. King's is based on fellow wrestler Alex. His mask is now more reminiscent of a lion than a jaguar, with the mane mimicking Alex's long hair. He reminds me a little of Leo from Red Earth. The shaggy cowl is a cool look, and I wonder if it could be applied to a more standard King design. The rest of the outfit is basically just Alex's, although the gloves and boots have been altered to look a bit more like King's. I appreciate how much Street Fighter X Tekken is willing to change his character model to do something new and experimental. Also, an 8 out of 10. His Tag Tournament 2 3P is biker gear. It's cool, I guess, but aside from the cut, it just looks like a generic outfit that was slapped together in customization mode. Plus, unlike his tap-out costume, there's no color aside from a tiny bit of blue on his gloves. 4 out of 10. Compared to the other Legacy characters, King's Tekken 7 redesign is pretty minor. The biggest change is that he now has a cape, which I'm on the fence about. On the one hand, it's an unnecessary addition to a sleek design that sometimes obscures his silhouette, and that's when the physics engine isn't having a total freakout. Also, his tail blends into the leopard print. But on the other hand, it helps to sell this as an over-the-top wrestling persona and plays into his regal moniker. Plus, it's another reference to Tiger Mask. I was more negative towards the cape early on, but it's definitely grown on me. The only other difference between this and his Tekken 5 1P is that his color palette has been simplified. I feel like I should miss the purple, but I really don't. Blue and yellow, while not quite complementary, still contrast well, and unlike in Tekken 3, his outfit is complex enough to be interesting regardless of color scheme. The removal of secondary colors also gives him more of a heroic vibe, especially in combination with the cape. I like the metallic sheen to his trunks as well, 9 out of 10. His 2P is, oh come on Namco, I thought you had this figured out, why are his gauntlets yellow again? I will say that I like the cape better here, as it adds more variety to his palette, or maybe I'm just biased because it's red. 7 out of 10. He also has capeless versions of each of these costumes. This is a super nice option to have, but since I'm not sure if I even like the cape or not, it doesn't change my scores for his 1P. It does definitely make his 2P worse though, because then it's just his Dark Resurrection 1P again. And with that, we have ranked every single King costume. All in all, he has some of the coolest character designs in the entire FGC. There's a reason I main him even though I don't like grapplers and don't care about wrestling. But that's just my opinion, so what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. Also, let me know which character you'd like to see next. For episode 10, we'll be discussing 2 Soulcalibur characters, Yun Sung as requested by Unknown29, and Talim as requested by Roboman. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I bid thee...